Okay, so we have Rich C, and thank you, Rich. He's from Philly. All right, man. Thank you for coming out, man. We love Philly, man. Even though we're rivals in some ways, in the sports world, but that's okay.
No football talk. No football talk.
No football talk. No baseball talk. Okay. All right, man. We're just glad to have you. Thank you for coming out on short notice, and we appreciate your service, man. We know where your heart is. So, without further ado, give you Rich C.
Hey everybody, Rich here, grateful, recovering marijuana addict. And, for me, I say marijuana addict because I'm primarily in Marijuana Anonymous, but I qualify for a lot of 12-step fellowships for a lot of things. None of that really matters. What matters is in here. And I heard another speaker talk about this too. I never felt like I was good enough. Nobody liked me. I don't fit in. And I tried to escape that for a long, long time. And, I usually say at Marijuana Anonymous meetings, jokingly, I say that, my story includes more than just marijuana. And I feel comfortable saying that here, and that, for me, like even when I was a little kid, like comic books and candy, I remember one experience I had when I was a young man. This was in the 70s. And my family used to go down the shore for the summer, and one of my grandmothers gave each of the grandchildren one summer $25 to spend. It was supposed to last you a little while, at least a few weeks. I spent mine the first day on comic books and candy, and then I stole money out of the other envelopes because I wanted more, and that's just how I did things. And I always wanted to escape those feelings, those crazy thoughts in my head, and I did that in a variety of different ways. I remember, like one of the things I used to do, my dear sister, and I'll tell you a little more about her a little later. She passed away, unfortunately, but we used to hold on to each other, and we would spin ourselves around and around and around. We called it getting drunk, and I liked that otherworldly feeling that it produced, and I sought that in a variety of different ways. Think crazy things that kids do, sniffing things, all kinds of substances, that anything that I thought might make me feel different than I felt, which was no good. Not measuring up, and my first experience with an actual a chemical was alcohol, and it was through my grandfather, and there were a couple of things that now, I don't know if he was an alcoholic, although my mother confided in me that after his death, it did say on his death certificate, secondary cause of death, alcoholism. So at least one of the doctors thought that he was. He never found his way into the rooms of recovery. But I remember a couple of experiences. I remember sitting on his lap when I was a child and getting a sip of his beer, and remembering that feeling. I wasn't getting drunk at that point, but I just liked that. I saw that bonding, we were bonding over a can of beer, and I also remember he used to take me, I was his first grandchild, and he used to take me to the bars with him. And now I saw glamorous nightclubs. That's not what they were. I understand that he preferred dive bars. They were dive bars, but that's not what I saw. I saw that I heard sounds and the smells and the clinking of the glasses and the jovial conversations. And, and I associated that, with a good time. And now this was, I was, raised in the 70s and early 80s. And this was kind of just before the Just Say No era and Nancy Reagan, but things were kind of heading in that direction. But I was not a just say no kind of kid. I was like a just say yes. And I, in particular, looked forward to when I would smoke marijuana. I had this older cousin, he's about 10 years older than me. And, when I was a kid, and this was in the 70s, he had the long hair, hippie, and I found that attractive. I thought that's what I want to be. And he smoked pot, so I looked forward to it. And I remember hanging out in the corners in South Philadelphia with some of the older kids. And I was about 12 or 13, and they were maybe 14, 15, and begging them to let's get some weed. And finally they did. They finally acquiesced and decided to get the little guy high. And some people say, when they're telling their story or when they talk about weed, they didn't get high the first time. That was not my experience. I did get high the first time. And I chased that feeling for a long, long time, like I said, my story includes a lot of things, like other substances, really, brought me to my knees. But I had this fantasy that I could keep smoking marijuana, and not have consequences. And I just couldn't do it, and I remember, and I was having consequences from when I was a teenager, and into my early 20s. And, it was suggested that I seek treatment. It was suggested that I go to meetings. I was told about AA meeting. Back then, I had no idea there was such a thing as Marijuana Anonymous. So I was told about AA meetings. And I remember going to my first AA meeting. I must have been 20 something. This was in like the late 80s, early 90s. And looking around the room, and all I saw was old white men. I didn't see any black people. I didn't see any women, and I didn't see any young people. I was a young person at the time, and I felt like I didn't fit in. This is not for me. I absolutely do fit in AA, but that's not what I saw, and I promptly ran the other way. So my sobriety date is July 23rd, 2002. Okay, and I had gone to prior to that, I had gone to this one particular outpatient program several times. It's called rehab after work. You go to work during the day and then you do your rehab at night. And I remember going to their program one time, and it was my first night. And they said, "Well, Richard, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what your drug of choice is?" And blah, blah. I said, "Well, my name is Rich. My drug of choice is marijuana." I said, "And the reason that I'm here is because I have a problem with alcohol and I have a problem with drugs. But you know what? I'll never stop smoking marijuana. I got to have something. And the counselor there said, "Well, okay, we'll leave the lights on for you." And I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I know now what he meant was, with an attitude like that, you're not going to stick around. You're bound to go back out there, and back out there I went. The first time let me tell you this story too. I had an uncle. He passed away bet free for over 30 years. But he was a compulsive gambler, when I was a child, and he got into GA and got I guess bet free, I believe is the word they use. He got bet free in Gamblers Anonymous, and he had friends in his program that were also in AA, that were also in recovery. And interestingly enough, one of his friends was sort of like our equivalent of a peer specialist. And so there was at this point in my life with my parents, the only thing that they were doing for me was providing me with dinner. They weren't giving me money anymore. I guess my mother went to a few Al-Anon meetings. So they told me one night that they wanted to take me to dinner over my aunt and uncle's house. And I didn't think anything of it, but I go over there, and it's an intervention with this guy. They're telling me that they thought I needed inpatient treatment. I'm like, "Oh, no, absolutely not. I'll go to rehab after work again, or I'll start going to the meetings again." And let me tell you what going to a meeting at that era meant for me. Going to a meeting meant going out, getting lost for a few hours, smoking a joint, and then coming home and saying how wonderful of a meeting it was. I usually didn't go. Once in a while I went, but more often than not, I didn't go. So like I said, it was suggested that I go to inpatient. My first experience with inpatient treatment happened in the summer of 2001. I did not get sober then. I remember they sent me to this treatment center. It was called the Keystone Center, and I went there, and I was there for the weekend. They weren't able to reach my insurance company, so they didn't find out that I was going to be denied coverage until Monday. And they kept my insurance on Monday. We're not paying for this. You can go back to rehab after work, but we're not paying for inpatient rehab. And so they sent me home, and I used that night. And I stayed back out there, that last year was absolutely crazy. It included some other things. It included some things I thought I would never. And I always thought that I wasn't that bad because I never smoked crack. I thought that I wasn't that bad because I never did heroin. Neither one of those things was actually true. I just wasn't regularly around for me. So I wasn't regularly doing crack. I wasn't regularly doing heroin, but I had done it a few times. But that last year I was regularly doing heroin, and I was getting into this, I had two states of being: dope sick and not dope sick. There was no high anymore. And so that last year, I remember it was actually July 22nd, and I had made the arrangement. Now I call my sobriety date the very last day that I use, because then the next day is day one. That's just how I do it. And it would have been July 22nd, and I had made a pledge that I wasn't going to do any heroin. I wasn't going to do anything. You know, knew I was going to treatment the next day. And, but I broke down that morning of the 23rd and I smoked a joint. And that was the last substance that I used. It didn't do anything for me. Didn't make me feel any better. You know, they took me and back to the same treatment center. And this time the treatment center fought for me. They got me 7 days worth of detox there at their treatment center. Then they sent me down to this lovely program down in Florida, which I went to for a month. And you want to know what I learned in training? I think treatment is wonderful, but what I learned in treatment was the importance of having a program, coming into a 12-step fellowship, getting a sponsor, working the steps, and having that spiritual awakening. And of course, it was suggested to me that I go to either AA or NA. I chose AA. I had no idea there was such a thing as Marijuana Anonymous. So I remember the guy down in Florida told me, he said, when you get back to Philadelphia, I want you to put your hand up and say, I'm a newcomer. And I need help. And I did that. I went to the Shopper Special. It's still around today. I still go to it once in a while. And I still know people from that room. And I put my hand up and I said, you know, my name's Rich. I'm an alcoholic. I need help. And everybody came up to me after the meeting. And it was also suggested that I do aftercare, that I go back to rehab after work. And I did. And I was in that program for a few months and I finally graduated from their program. But I had this meeting buddy and her and I used to go to meetings together where we would just compare notes, you know, and talk about the meetings we had gone to. And I remember her telling me in group one day that she had accidentally gone to a Marijuana Anonymous meeting. And I'm like, excuse me, they have that? Where is it? You know, and I promptly made it to that meeting a few weeks later, and that became my home group. It was the then Wednesday evening Philly Bluntless meeting. It's now on Thursday evenings. It's still my home group. I found my sponsor in that room, and I worked the 12 steps. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about my path through the 12 steps, you know, and the first step for me was a 21-year journey through active addiction. And in particular for me, what really resonates with the first step was powerlessness over marijuana. You know, I knew that I was powerless over alcohol. I knew that I was powerless over real drugs, but I didn't want to accept that I was powerless over marijuana. I wanted to, there's a thing in the MA book where it says, we would hope that the people in Marijuana Anonymous would teach us how to use marijuana and not have consequences. We wanted to use marijuana in a moderate and controlled way. Oh boy, did I want to do that. And trying to do that, I learned two things. One, I can't do it. You know, smoking marijuana, it leads me right back to other drugs. And this is key. This is the first step for me. When I'm smoking marijuana, I don't want to do things. I don't want to live life. I don't want to participate. You know, I just want to be left alone. And that is not my life today because I've surrendered to this disease. Okay, so, and I'm so glad we had a spiritual person talking, you know, about God. And in MA, they really love saying higher power. I say God. That's what I say. I was raised your traditional Catholic. But that was kind of a problem with my second step, because that punishing God that I believe, I don't think this is what the Catholic Church actually teaches, but what I saw was this punishing God. If I disobeyed the 10 commandments, I was going to go to hell. You know, the nun slapping you on the wrist if you every little wrong that you did. And I just saw that as such a negative. And in my search, in my second step, I came to believe in a loving God. It turned out to be that same God, but it's a loving God, a caring, nurturing being, you know, a pure light and energy that I love. There's this poem called Footprints, you know, where this man is walking with the Lord on the beach and he sees the two sets of footprints over the path of his life. But in the most difficult points of his life, he only sees one set of footprints. So he asked the Lord, you know, what happened? You deserted me in my most trying moments. And the Lord says to my child, that is when I carried you. And that's what higher power is for me. It carries me. It gives me, it's a supporting strength. You know, and then could I turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power? And yes, I could. I went to, you know, when I was about 17, I went on this, it's called the Men of Malvern. It's a Catholic spiritual retreat, and it's done with fathers and sons and grandsons. And so I went with my dad when I was 17. And then every year after that, he would ask me, do you want to go on retreat? Do you want to go on retreat? I would always say no. Not interested in that. I was interested in getting high. I wasn't interested in retreat. So when I got sober, he asked me if I wanted to go on retreat. And I said yes. And I went on retreat. And, you know, they have a variety of different spiritual activities, but one of them was you got your time with the priest. one-on-one. And most of the guys did your standard Catholic confession. But I asked the priest if I can do my third step prayer with him. And he said yes. And I said the prayer and I meant the prayer, and I really made that decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And he challenged me to continue to say that prayer for the next 30 days and to really make that decision to trust God. That's what third step is for me. It's about trusting God, and then the fourth step, putting it down on paper, looking at my life, the circumstances of my life, the things that I resented, my resentments, my fears, my sexual conduct, putting it down on paper. And, I've heard some people say that you should be able to do your fourth step in an hour. That was not my experience. I spent a Saturday afternoon where I wrote and wrote and wrote like many hours. I did additional work on it. And then finally, I was ready to take the fifth step with my sponsor. And we went down to the Jersey Shore in front of the ocean, nature, higher power. And we talked and he helped me identify patterns of behavior. And at the very end, he asked me, he said, Richard, is there anything else? Is there anything you're hanging on to, some deep, dark secret? And there, boy, was there. And he told me his deep, dark secret. And I didn't think it was that bad. So I told him mine and he didn't think it was that bad. And, and I share that experience, with the sponsee when we take the fifth step and they get to hear my deep, dark secret, and then the sixth and the seventh step, the sixth step helped me prepare for the seventh step. The truth of the matter is I was not entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character. I actually took my sixth step. Interestingly enough, I go to other fellowships also. I was at an NA meeting and the speaker was speaking on the sixth step, and it just really made sense. And I went up and I had a conversation with him after the meeting, and we talked about the sixth step. And I became ready to ask to have God remove all my defects of character. And in the seventh step, I take that on an active basis. I ask that my character defects be removed. And for me, and I usually reverse it. I ask for the attribute, the character attribute. That's the opposite of it. The big ones for me are impatience and intolerance. And when I pray for patience and tolerance, when I'm on the road, when I'm at work, when I deal with any other human being, and then the eighth and the ninth step. The eighth step helped me prepare for the ninth step. I was not entirely ready to make my amends, and I had to plan what they were going to be and who I needed to make amends with. And there's two that I really want to talk about. I told you guys a little. I hinted that I had lost my sister. My sister, she had her own demons. She suffered from mental illness, and she took her life when I had about 7 years of sobriety. Hardest thing I've had to deal with as a human being, but I really take great comfort in the fact that I was able to make a proper amends with her. And I'll never, ever forget her words to me. I explained it. Making amends is more than just saying you're sorry. I had to own up to the stuff that I had done. And I explained to her the things that I had done. And I asked her at the very end, I said, Donna, how can I make this up to you? What can I do to make this better? And I'll never forget her words to me. She said, and they call me Ricky. She said, Ricky, I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad you found your way into recovery. I want you to never stop going to those meetings. And I'm just so proud of you. And I'll never forget those words. And I take great comfort in those words. And I also want to talk about, an amends I made with my father, because making an amends is more than just saying you're sorry. And a lot of times it involves financial restitution. I had to make financial restitution to my father. One of the things that I did a lot of things where I stole money from him. But one particular, one of the things that I did is I stole money, quarters out. He would save quarters for his grandchildren. And I would steal those quarters in bulk and buy drugs with it. And, so before I made my amends with him, I went to the bank and I bought 3 rolls of quarters. I don't know how many I stole, but I needed to make a gesture and I paid him back for that. And, I had to do that with an old job as well, that I had stole time from, and I couldn't go back to it. So what I did is I made a donation to it was an art college. I made a donation to one of their funds. And the rest, the 10, 11, and 12 for me, that's the maintenance of my program. 10 for me is like a conscience, I guess. I don't do MA has a wonderful tool in our app where you can do like a nightly inventory. I don't do that. I always say I'm going to do that, but I don't. But the way the 10th step manifests for me is when I do something wrong or when I'm about to do something wrong, I realize it and it hurts. and sometimes I catch myself and sometimes I don't, and I have to do the promptly made amends part. And then the 11th step for me is about prayer and meditation, and for me lately, it's been a lot about meditation. I worked for the city of Philadelphia for 33 years. And I lost my job in the pandemic, something I never thought I would face, and I have another job, plus I get a pension from the city. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the recovery part. Meditation. It's been a lot about meditation because I need to listen to what path God has for my course in life. And, and then the 12th step, and this is the 12th step, and this is not me 12-stepping you guys. This is me being 12-stepped, by doing things like this, by coming to this wonderful recovery event and talking about my MA story. I get to stay sober for one more day. When I reach out my hand to a newcomer and welcome them to a meeting, I get to stay sober for one more day. When I work with a sponsee, I get to stay sober for one more day. And so I'm looking at my time. Looks like I have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to start to wrap it up. So for me, actually I gave myself 25 minutes. All right. Anyway, so I want to talk about the recovery, like what my life looks like today, and it's crazy. My life is absolutely insane. I lost my job, and I'll tell you what, that. Thank you.
Sound up.
So, I lost my
sound up. I need to go put my. Sorry, I muted you by mistake, Rich. Go ahead. I'm mute this out. All right. Open sound.
No problem.
Uh-oh. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. So anyway,
and you have 7 minutes. So
okay. So anyway, I had to change jobs, and I'll be honest, when I first lost the job, it hit me a little bit, and I got a little bit into the I'm not good enough and people don't like me feelings, and that didn't last long. That's one of the wonderful things about recovery is those feelings don't last long. Feelings are not facts. I get through things, and I just started doing the next right thing. I started applying for jobs. I took a position with Amazon. At 55, I'm really not suited to be working in a warehouse, and that didn't really work out. But it helped me bridge the gap. I applied for unemployment. The state of Pennsylvania took a good long time, but eventually gave me about $11,000 of unemployment.
Okay.
And all as one payment. So.
Okay, I'm not seeing me here.
Could you mute, please?
We can mute. Let's mute you again.
Okay. All right. So, I totally lost my train of thought. So anyway, I did all the next right things, and applying for jobs, and I was able to obtain a position for a mental health agency. Something I always dreamed of, when I was a child. I always loved talking to my friends and listening to their problems. Had this idea that I would someday be a counselor. And, when I first got sober, I took some classes.
Okay, here we go. Unmute.
No, you want to mute yourself right now.
I have to what?
Mute yourself.
Okay.
Until we speak, and then you can unmute.
All right, I'm gonna.
Okay. Zoom, the wonders of Zoom.
I know. We apologize.
That's okay. I've been doing these Zoom meetings for a while. Anyway, when I first got sober, I had this vision that I was going to be an addictions counselor, and I took some classes, and I didn't follow through with it. When an opportunity presented itself, when I was looking for a job to work for this mental health agency, not as a counselor, obviously I don't have the credentialing, but in a support role, I'm sort of like the office manager for our outpatient program. And, and it's been wonderful. I love it. It's really rewarding. I get to help people. But see, here's the thing, it's gotten crazy lately. We've had, there have been some changes in the regulations due to COVID. I know you folks have dealt with some of that as well. And there's been a recent change where, there's been some requirements of people to I don't want to get political or anything, but certain people in my agency decided they did not want to comply with certain regulations that were required of people in the medical field. And as a result, the two people that worked just under me had to leave the agency. So my job has been absolutely crazy for the last 2 weeks. You know, and we're doing what we can to deal with it, you know, and I was having a conversation with my boss and with my boss's boss, and they know I'm in recovery, and I was saying that, you know, I said, John, you know, I'm just going to, what we say in recovery is we suit up and we show up, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to suit up and show up, and that's what I've been doing. I've been suiting up and showing up. They have a lot of people helping me. I'm doing a lot more work. You know, it's just, you know, what I have to do. And being in recovery, you know, having a higher power gives me the strength to do these things, you know, to deal with, you know, whatever comes my way. And, you know, and I'm going to wrap it up with this. I want to talk a little bit about how I handle sponsorship and sponsees in the COVID era, in Zoom era. And I've been utilizing Zoom, you know, and I always, you know, I always had sponsees. You know, this one of the most rewarding things that I can do as a recovering person is to walk another person through the steps. And I've always done that, you know, but it's been more of a slow roll. And, you know, as I meet someone at an MA meeting and I sponsor them, and I have maybe 1 or 2 sponsees. But since Zoom has come around and the MA has really embraced, I mean, other fellowships have too. It's amazing how 12-step fellowships have embraced this Zoom tool and this ability for us to still have our meetings, even though there's a horrible pandemic. And MA more so than other fellowships, because like, I mean, when I was first getting sober, you know, going to MA meetings, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 people in the room. And, you know, we had wonderful meetings, but, you know, now I go to an MA meeting and there's 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 people in the room. So I'm meeting a lot of sponsees, and the way I work sponsorship now is we have a wonderful workbook, an MA workbook, and the person will go through the step, you know, and they'll answer the questions in the workbook. And then we get on a one-on-one Zoom and we talk about it, you know, and I share my experience, how I handle the step, and they talk about their experience with the questions, you know, and we talk it through, and we work the steps right on Zoom. And then hopefully, you know, I've had a few people who have been able to get together with and do 5th steps. I really prefer to do a 5th step in person, you know, but it's an amazing process. I'm just so glad to be here. I'm so glad to be in recovery. You know, I'm so glad that you guys asked me to do this event. You know, you guys reached out to Marijuana. I give service at Marijuana Anonymous World Service, and they, you know, they reached out to me and they said, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, of course. You ask for service, you say yes. Anyway, I just want to shut up just by saying I love you all. I love being in recovery, and looking forward to hearing the other speakers. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing. That was
Yes,
amazing.
absolutely.
That
Yes.
was
Thank
amazing.
you, thank you, thank you, man.
I
Appreciate it.
I do have one question, because in our area, MA is not in very prevalent, right? So there wasn't a lot of places that I could go to get a speaker. Like there's one place in DC, and I went there last year and got an MA speaker. And what we try to do is get last year's speaker to recommend this year's speaker, but I couldn't find it, right? So how big is MA is my question.
Yeah, MA has really expanded since Zoom. You know, it's been like amazing, the growth that we've shown. It's always been a struggle. You know, there've been meetings and there's districts, you know, and it's congregated. Philadelphia is part of District 8, which is mostly New York City, and they reached out to us and we became part of their district. And there's a lot of MA out in California, but it really struggled in other towns because there's, you know, and even in Philadelphia, there was 1 meeting. You know, for a long time. Now there's 2, but since Zoom, it's just been amazing. And one of the areas we've had real growth in is in Atlanta, in Georgia. You know, as they in the last Marijuana Anonymous conference, they were voted in as a district, and they have a meeting every single night at 8 p.m. that gets 40, 50, 60 people. And it meets every single night. And then some of them, they have some in-person meetings too. And but really the growth that we've had in the last pandemic, almost, you know, year and a half, it's just been tremendous. So yeah, we're starting to grow, and I really love being a part of MA.